Well, here we are again. Let's get back in our social studies books today. Get your social studies book. You're going to need them all week this week. So just have them by your computer as we go through these social studies lessons. Let's go back to where we were ended yesterday on page 46 and 47 because we were just introduced to the Articles of Confederation. Now, remember yesterday, let's review what we talked about. We talked about after the Revolutionary War, we became a new country, the United States of America. We won our freedom, so we had to have a government for our new country. And we talked yesterday about the beginnings of that plan and how it was called the Articles of Confederation. We talked about why they made it a weak central government for our country, about how they didn't want anything like having a king and parliament again, bossing the whole country around, telling them where they could and couldn't go, and making a bunch of taxes and forcing soldiers to live in their homes and things like that happened with old King George. So they made a weak government on purpose. They gave most of the powers to the states. And that's going to play an important part in today's lesson. So thinking about the Articles of Confederation, thinking about some of the things that were created, in today's lesson, we're going to get into some of the weaknesses that the Articles of Confederation caused for our country. So page 48 is where we're going to begin today. And the title of this page is called Testing the Confederation. So we're going to read this page first. Almost as soon as it was created, the Confederation struggled with some difficult problems. The central government had no money to repay its war debts. So remember, it costs a lot of money to fight a war, and so we fought this war with England, but to get better weapons and things for our soldiers, we borrowed money from other countries like France and Spain, and so we owed money to these countries, and we owe them a lot of money. So what are we going to do? I guess our government will just create some taxes, right? No, because remember, under the Articles of Confederation, it had no power to raise money through taxes. Congress asked the states for money to pay back debts, but the states are not going to give up their money to pay the country's debts either. So it received very little. So there's one problem. Our country's in debt, and we can't raise any money to pay our debt to other countries. That's not good. Trade with other countries. The Articles of Confederation gave the states the power to make trade agreements with other countries. As a result, trade agreements varied widely from state to state. Because this could be confusing, many countries decided just not to trade with the United States. This meant Americans could not sell their goods to people in other countries. They also could not buy things from other countries. American businesses and workers suffered as a result. So if you were in some kind of industry or some kind of somebody who made something like maybe shipbuilding, or maybe you're a farmer in the South who grew a lot of crops in the good soil, and you wanted to ship your tobacco or whatever it might be to other countries who would buy it from you, you made a lot of money that way. But because there was no regulation, because the government didn't have any regulation on the trade that the states was doing with other countries, it became very confusing for other countries because, let's just say South Carolina, you can trade with South Carolina and tobacco will cost this much money. But if you go up to North Carolina or some other state, it's going to cost you more money and they have these rules, but this state has these rules. And you see how it was very confusing for other countries. So they're just like, forget it. We're just not going to trade with the United States. So those people who counted on selling things to other countries lost a lot of money. And those people who wanted to buy things from other countries couldn't buy them anymore because those countries quit trading with us. Here's a dock. Now, a dock is a place on the ocean where ships would come in where they're going to trade. Maybe our ships would fill up with goods from our country and ship off to other countries to sell it, or other countries might send ships into a dock where we would buy stuff from them. Docks were usually very busy places, like this one in Philadelphia. When foreign countries bought fewer goods, sellers earned less money and workers lost their jobs. The economy slowed and everyone suffered. In addition to shipping, what other businesses can you see in this image? Well, you've got shipping, you've got somebody carrying stuff with a horse, so maybe some people who were transporters, transporting things. I can't really see. It's a small picture, isn't it? But you've got lots of different jobs affected by trade with other countries. it's interesting because that's still a big deal, even in our election year this year between President Trump and Joe Biden. They both have different ideas on how we should trade with other countries. And so if you listen to people talking, listen to them debate about it, you might hear this in the debates, even in our election this year, because it's still a little controversial like it was back then. Now, it's different today, the way we trade then, but not so much. So that's still an issue in our country, trading with other countries. No respect. Let's read what this is all about. Additionally, foreign countries did not respect the United States. According to the peace treaty that ended the revolution, the British were supposed to remove their troops from the western lands. When the war ended, the Continental Army broke up. This meant there were no soldiers out west to force the British to leave. To make matters worse, British troops gave weapons to the American Indians. They encouraged American Indians to keep on attacking American settlements. Spain also caused problems for the new nation. It controlled the Mississippi River at the port of New Orleans. In 1784, Spain closed the river to American traffic. Think about that. It's in our new country, and Spain is also in our new country, and they're saying we can't use our rivers. Crazy. In 1784, Spain closed the river to American traffic. This caused problems for the farmers and merchants because they used the river to transport crops and other goods. Like the British, the Spanish also gave weapons to American Indians in the Carolinas and Georgia and encouraged them to attack. There was little the United States could do to address these problems because the Articles of Confederation did not give Congress the power to raise an army. However, the states could refuse to send men to serve in the army. So think about that. We have these countries, Spain, giving weapons to Indians to attack our cities. We have Britain, England, giving weapons to the Indians to attack us. Wouldn't that make you want to fight them? Well, we couldn't raise an army. Remember, the Articles of Confederation could not create an army. So, weak government, not looking good right now. What about state taxes? Most states tax goods that pass through their states. Each state charged different amounts. Congress had no power to stop them. Some people could not afford the taxes, so they bought fewer goods. As stores sold fewer goods, people earned less money. Soon people in every state were buying and selling fewer goods and earning less money. That's the economy. That's how much people are buying and how much people are selling. That's another thing you'll hear talk about in our election year, the economy. And so both people running for president have their own plan for what's going to make the economy of our country work good, where more people will have more money to buy things. And when more people are buying things, it helps businesses sell more things. And so that's called the economy. So listen to that when you listen to people talking about the election too. Let's read the caption for this picture. Even France, a former ally of the United States, did not respect the power of the new nation. In the 1790s, the new U.S. Navy battled with French ships to defend its right to travel and trade safely on the high seas. The Constellation left was the first U.S. Navy ship to be put to sea and the first to capture an enemy ship. It went on to win many battles. So here we were, friends with the French in the Revolutionary War, and now we're fighting with them because they didn't respect us, fighting with them to trade on the open sea. It's not looking so good, folks. Turn to page 50. It gets even worse. A rebellion in Massachusetts. After the Revolution, farmers in many states had trouble paying their debts. They'd borrowed money to buy tools and other things they needed. They also needed money to pay state and local taxes. When they could not pay these debts, they were jailed, and their land was taken away from the courts for payments. Many of the struggling farmers were patriots of the Revolution, having served as soldiers in the Continental Army. So think about this. This is amazing to me. Here are these guys who were former soldiers in the Revolutionary War. They were the ones who went to battle. They were the ones who saw their friends get killed by the British. They were the ones who won the freedom for our country. And now these guys go back home. The war is over. They go home to their farms and they're ready to start raising crops, and they've borrowed money and to buy their seed because they haven't been home. They haven't had any crops. They didn't get paid very much as soldiers. And so they've got to borrow money from the banks to have money to buy seed and tools to farm. And now they can't pay these debts back. They can't pay their debts back. And so these very men who have won our freedom are now being thrown in jail for not being able to pay their debts. Even though they gave us our freedom's being taken away. So they served in the Continental Army, but rather than paying the soldiers in cash, Congress gave them notes promising them money for the future. It's like saying, we don't have any money right now, but one day we'll pay you. Well, that didn't help them out. Unfortunately, those notes could not be used to pay their debts. In 1786, about 1,000 fed-up farmers and former soldiers stormed a courthouse in Massachusetts to stop the courts from taking more land. Revolutionary War captain Daniel Shays was a leader of the rebellion. Alarmed by the uprising, the governor sent the militia to put down the rebellion. Leaders of the uprising were captured and put in jail. You know, it's kind of sad because these were the soldiers who won us our freedom. Their land is being taken away. They're being thrown in jail because they can't pay their debts. So they get pretty mad. And they have this kind of violent rebellion. And here they go to the courthouse, and they're going to make sure the government doesn't take away any more of these former patriot land. And so the governor of Massachusetts gets his militia, his little Massachusetts army together, and stops this rebellion, often called Shays' Rebellion. And they didn't get to accomplish their goals. As a matter of fact, they were thrown in jail. But the Shays' Rebellion showed us something important about our country. Let's read this last paragraph. Calls for a stronger government. Shays' Rebellion scared state and national leaders. They worried that angry debtors might rebel in other states. Although Massachusetts was able to stop the rebellion, other states might not be so lucky. And because there was no longer a national army, there was nothing Congress could do to help. The central government was just too weak. Something had to be done to strengthen the government. State leaders decided it was time to make changes to the Articles of Confederation. So this Constitution, this Articles of Confederation, made weak on purpose by our leaders, is not working. You've got all these problems. You've got problems with Indians. You've got problems with other countries. You've got problems with your own citizens who are rebelling, and the government can't do anything. They're in debt and they can't raise money. It's not working well at all. It looks like our country's going to fall apart just as quickly as it got started. So what's going to happen? Well, we just read they're going to have to meet again. This Continental Congress is going to have to meet again and say, look, this stinks. This Articles of Confederation stinks. We've got to make some better plans. We've got to make a better government. That's going to be tomorrow's lesson. Let's finish reading this page right here about Daniel Shays. Historians believe Daniel Shays was born in Massachusetts. Little is known about his early life. When the American Revolution broke out, Shays offered to serve in the Continental Army. He fought both at Lexington and the Battle of Bunker Hill. So this man who was a farmer who got thrown in jail for not being able to pay his taxes and fighting to help other people not get their land taken away, he was there at the very first battle of the Revolution at Lexington. He was also there at the Battle of Bunker Hill. And he moved up the ranks in the Army, later becoming a captain. So I bet George Washington knew Daniel Shays, don't you? At the end of the war, Daniel Shays left the Army. He returned home to Massachusetts and started working for his local government. However, to pay for the war, the Massachusetts government raised taxes many times. Shays and many others could not afford to pay these taxes. When they could not pay the taxes, the government would come and take their property. Shays and others were furious. They did not think it was fair to punish people who were already struggling. Shays became one of the many to rebel against the Massachusetts government. Eventually, Shays was caught and arrested for causing the violence. 1 year later, Shays asked for a pardon, official forgiveness for his crimes. The government agreed to grant him one. Shays then moved to Vermont and later New York, where he died in 1825. So, just another example of how the government is not working out to help people. Let's read this over here. 2 views of Shays' Rebellion. So you've got two people here. You've got Captain Adam Wheeler and Sam Adams. And so they're talking about Daniel Shays and the farmers rebelling against the government. Let's see what each person says. So Captain Adam Wheeler, who was a Massachusetts farmer who fought in the French and Indian War and the American Revolution, he says, "We've lately emerged from a bloody war in which liberty was the glorious prize aimed at. I early stepped forth in the defense of this country and cheerfully fought to gain this prize, and liberty is still the object I have in view." So he's saying, hey, I fought for the freedom in our country. I was one of the first people to volunteer, and I still need my freedom. It doesn't feel like I'm free yet. Sam Adams says, in monarchy, the crime of treason may admit of being pardoned or lightly punished, but the man who dares rebel against the laws of a republic ought to suffer death. So he says, you guys want to rebel against our brand new country? You should die. Wow, Sam Adams, he's one of the guys of the Sons of Liberty, so I'm surprised he said that. Well, we've got these two views, and we've got Daniel Shays. So let's look at one little history story here about Daniel Shays, okay? So the last Daniel Shays, let's see, how Shays' uprising changed America. Let's read this together. This wasn't how it's supposed to be. This wasn't the future they envisioned when they cast off the British. 5 years after Yorktown, the promise of the American Revolution had been unfulfilled for thousands of farmers in western and central Massachusetts, many of whom had risked their lives serving in the state militia and the Continental Army. They'd received little pay or reimbursement for their military service. And now, with the fledgling country mired in a severe economic recession, debt collectors began to seize their farms and possessions for unpaid debts and delinquent taxes. Men who fought for their freedom now languished behind bars in debtors' prison. Similar discontent smoldered from the New Hampshire to South Carolina, but it raged in Massachusetts, where the state government in Boston refused to hear the cries for relief coming from points west. The legislature not only rejected a measure to print more money, it imposed new taxes on people and property in early 1786. Although there was a severe cash shortage, state courts strictly enforced obligations to repay debts with paper money. So they're just saying, this is what we just read about, that you have to pay these debts in Massachusetts. Even though they knew people were poor, they said you got to pay the debts. So I'm not going to read all this. I didn't know what it was. I just clicked on it. I thought it might be something pretty neat. But you've got this story retold here about Shays' Rebellion, and it just tells you a lot more information about it. But we've already read about it in our story. So you can look at good places like history.com. If we ever read something that you're more interested in and you'd like to learn more about, you can go to history.com and you can type up Shays' Rebellion, or you could type in the American Revolution, and they have even little videos sometimes on these things that we've talked about. This says, last battle of Shays' Rebellion was here, February 27th, 1787. So I guess this is where the Massachusetts militia put down Shays' Rebellion. Well, the subtitle here is important. The story behind the uprising that propelled the Constitutional Convention to form a stronger national government. And that's kind of where we're left off today. We're left off with this Articles of Confederation is weak. It doesn't work very well. And so what are we going to do to change it? Do you think it needs to be changed? What do you think they should do? Should they make a stronger government? But what if it's like having a king again? What would you have done? They obviously need to do something. So tomorrow's lesson, we're going to get into what changes they decide to make to help our country be stronger and better. So thank you for listening today. We'll come back tomorrow and see what changes they make to the Articles of Confederation. See you then.